My very special guest is the author of Work Life Well Lived, the Motives Met Pathway to No-B.S. Well-Being at Work. She's also the co-founder and CEO of the Motives Met platform and creator of the Human Needs Assessment, which empowers people to create their best work, life, and workplace. Her mission is to create a work world where we are human first and well-being is a right, not a privilege. She is Kelly Mackin. Welcome to the show, Kelly.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here today.
I'm thrilled to have you on the show because you were kind enough to send me an advanced copy of your book. I've got it right here. I'm really excited to be able to dig into it with you today.
Awesome. Can't wait. Let's do it.
Let's just jump right in here. And I absolutely adore one of your very first chapter titles. I read it. It was Dreaming of a Human Work World. Now, based on your research and experience, Kelly, what is a human work world?
Well, as you know, we have done just a ton of research to really uncover how to create health and happiness at work. And we discovered that unfortunately, we're kind of missing the mark, and that really a human work world is one in which our human needs are healthy and ideally thriving at work. And our research uncovered actually 28 of these human needs, which we call motives, that are really the heart of what being a human being with well-being at work is all about. And one of the most significant aspects of a work world that is human is not just these needs, but also honoring the emotions, right, that are driving these needs at work. Because at the end of the day, it comes down to the fact that we want to feel a certain way at work and we don't want to feel a certain way at work. You know, for example, if your need for variety isn't met, you're going to be bored. If your need for fairness isn't met, you'll feel resentful. If your need for work-life harmony isn't met, you're going to feel burnt out and overwhelmed. But if your need for autonomy is met, you're going to feel empowered. If you're doing meaningful work, you're going to feel inspired. So when these motives are met at work, we feel how we want to feel. And that motivates us and drives us in really a positive direction. But for so many of us, and I'm so glad that this is shifting in today's world, but I'm sure you can relate to this, that, you know, I grew up really being taught that professionalism equals dehumanization. That we got to shut off those emotions, shut down our needs, put on that workplace armor, as Brene Brown loves to call it, you know, and kind of try to hit the off button on our humanity when we go to work. And that's just not possible. We cannot do that. So really embracing our humanity and the emotions behind them and really honoring both of those aspects is what makes the work world more human.
I identify with that completely. You know, when I started military service or later on in business schools, we spent a lot of time talking about the technical aspects of, you know, whatever the mission was or whatever the topic du jour was. But a lot of times, you know, you're looking at technical things like innovation and scalability and performance and all these types of things, but we're almost acting like we don't have human beings. And I will say that the military got it right in my experience, where we talked a lot about troop welfare and these things. But you're exactly right that something has shifted. Something's changed, and our employees and even our clients are demanding more human experiences than they ever have. And I'm really excited about it because I think that it's just the right way to do business across, you know, all aspects of business.
Yeah, it's the right thing to do and it's the smart thing to do. That's it's both, you know, it's the ethical and moral thing to do. And really what research has found is that people actually want to show up and be human at work and treat others as human and have those values and virtues that we seem to hold so dear outside of work, that they actually want to bring those to work, but that we feel we can't do that. You know, as a boss, I can't be soft, right? I can't talk about that. I shouldn't care about that. I got to just care about the results. When really people want that more humanness brought in at all sorts of different levels. So the fact that we're now kind of being given permission in the best way to do that, and leaders in the best way are finally given permission to do that, is really helping to shift things, I think, in culture for sure.
Yeah, and you make a compelling case in the book about why we need to do this, but you also point out that, you know, basically we don't just get to have this. It doesn't happen automatically. And you actually list out 10 what you call dream killers. And I wonder if you could give us just a couple of examples of some of those dream killers and what is it that makes them so dangerous?
Yeah, well, every story has a villain, right? And unfortunately, mine is no different. We have these 10 dream killers that threaten the dream of a work life well lived, as we call it. And there's so much I could talk about here. So I will just try to keep it super high level. But a few of these dream killers, a few of these obstacles are really related to the fact that we don't have shared meaning and mindset around what the heck well-being at work is, what it means to thrive. And goal clarity equals goal achievement. So if we don't really understand ourselves, the goal we're shooting for, and if everybody on our team doesn't have the same goal, then it's going to make it so much more difficult to get there, right? No matter what the goal is. So, sometimes band-aids get thrown out there, and there's been a lot of talk about that now of how like, hey, having a mental health day off is great or free yoga classes, but that doesn't really solve for deeper problems that really inhibit being well at work, right? Then there's one of the things that really drove me crazy when I started on this research journey to go, okay, well, what even is thriving at work, right? Like, what does this mean? Is that there's so much dang noise out there to navigate through. There's just an overwhelming amount of opinions and information, and it's completely contradictory. One CEO and researchers telling you X and another one's telling you Y. One social media influencer is like, hustle to reach your potential and grow, and that's what you should want, and that's what every employee wants. But then a different one's like, no, screw the hustle. It's about work-life balance. It's about working by the pool anywhere in the world with margarita. It's about, so you're hearing all this stuff. And if you're a leader or if you're just yourself wanting to be happier at work, it's like, what are you supposed to do with all that? We need a way to organize, prioritize, and really simplify all that information in a way that helps us. And that's kind of what we set out to do. But a few of the other dream killers, and, God, I would love to touch on all of them. But one I'll mention that's really top of mind right now from a conversation I was having yesterday with a team is that we tend to take a more passive and reactive approach to well-being at work than a proactive or preventative one. We wait until we're so miserable. We wait until we're so burnt out, or our team is so burnt out, or so many people are leaving our company till we do something and go, okay, what is going wrong here? When instead prevention is a much better way to go, right? Prevention is better than cure. So it's really trying to show up on purpose with purpose to honor all these human needs so that you aren't kind of stuck in that reaction mode. And then the last one I'll touch on, because this is a biggie as well, is that we just don't talk about the things that matter most at work with ourselves and each other. We're so go, go, go all the time. We're on autopilot. We're not stopping to even reflect on how are our needs going and what does matter most to us. And we certainly aren't doing that with one another, and we're not talking about it. And if we don't talk about it, then we're not going to be able to solve problems and elevate these needs in the way that we need to.
I think both of those last two really resonate with me, which is that when I talk to managers, they're completely overwhelmed. They feel like there's these unrealistic expectations from the top, that they don't necessarily have the bandwidth to even get all the work done, much less to get the people work done. And that's one of the challenges. And if they don't create the space to have conversations on the people side of things, then all of a sudden, we take this approach like you spoke about a little bit earlier. It's like work, work, work all the time. And people are like either getting sick at work, getting frustrated at work, considering either putting on a side hustle or leaving work. These things really disrupt, the flow of work.
100%. Absolutely. And it is tough because leaders aren't given the times, tools, and resources, as I put it, to do this well. So you can't expect well-being at work. You can't expect, go have a people first culture, but we're not going to put any time, resources, dollars, or tools to do it. That's just completely unrealistic for everybody. And so that's, one of the things we really try to help leaders do, because it's tough. I won't lie and say it's easy. Some people want to be like, just do these few things. It's easy. It is not easy. It is tough.
Yeah, I agree with that 1,000%. It's not easy, but I think you also end up with this downward spiral, if you will, that once we don't make room for wellness, or we don't take the people-centric sort of approach that you're describing, what happens is that the number of collisions on a team, for example, goes up. The level of team commitment goes down. All of a sudden, I'm now withholding information because there's not psychological safety. And actually, what gobbles up all of our time is firefighting. And so managers and leaders are in this tough spot where it's like, if I don't prioritize understanding my team members, making sure that their needs are being met, then all of a sudden, we end up finding that all of our time is gone because we're in that reactive mode that you shared about well-being generally. And it's true for our execution as well.
Yes, no, absolutely.
Well, I think that one of the central themes in your book is all around motives. And I know you've talked about a little bit about getting our needs met, but just can you tell me a little bit more about motives? Let's just dig on that just a little bit deeper. What role do these types of motives, you identified 28 of them, for example, what role do they play in our work and in our lives?
Well, motives we say are the things that really matter most to us at work. So they're super important. They're the foundation, again, for thriving at work. But what was so interesting out of the research is that it really became clear that while all of these needs matter, they don't matter equally to each person or team. That we all have a few of these motives that are really going to rise to the top and be the main drivers in our work life today. And that what you need most, Matt, is going to be different than what I need most. That we don't need these things to the same degree in the same way at the same point in time. And it's really critical to know what we need most, because as we were just talking about, we only have so many resources as individuals and leaders, right? If I only have so much time, energy, dollars, and attention, how am I going to make the best decisions? How am I going to decide which job to take next? How am I going to decide if the limited attention I can give my team, how I'm going to best do that? So the way we put it is you need your own set of hierarchy of needs, that there is no one set hierarchy. You need to figure out what that is for you so that you are able to optimize your time, energy, dollars. Because if everything's a priority, nothing's a priority. These 28 needs really give us a great framework and a picture to understand the building blocks of thriving at work. But we're going to have to focus if we want to optimize our work life and our teams.
Yeah.
So that's why we ended up building our human needs assessment, because we figured that people don't have time to be sitting here reflecting on this stuff, but that's a huge problem like we just talked about. So we went, how can we build a tool that helps people make that time to reflect? How can we help people uncover what matters most? Because a lot of the time we don't even know. We're so busy. We all have blind spots. I don't always know what I need most, let alone what the 10 people I manage need most. So when you take our assessment, you uncover what are your driving 5 motives, and then you're really able to focus and kind of get help and resources to help elevate those. And as a leader go, okay, I'm going to now take an individualized approach instead of a one size fits none approach that just doesn't work.
And in the book, you have this beautiful illustration. I think you call it the motive circumplex, and it really organizes the 28 motives that you identified. And to your point, Kelly, you're talking about how once you complete the assessment, you've got great illustrations that kind of bold and show like, oh, it's interesting. These are on different sides of the model, and these are on the same side of the model. I'm not doing a great job here, and I know we're on a podcast, but can you describe the circumplex a little bit and how you structured it?
Yeah, I love our framework so much because as a type A person, it like gives this organizational structure. I mean, again, there's so much noise out there, and some of it was helpful of like, oh, think about growth, think about appreciation, but putting it in this framework makes it so much more digestible and allows us to use it in a way that's so much more powerful. So if you go to our website, motivesmet.com, you can see the framework. It's colored and it makes it really easy to grasp. But if you can envision a wheel, if you will, there's 10 main buckets that go around the wheel. And these are kind of the motive domains. So for example, there's the freedom domain or there's the advancement domain. And then the 28 motives fall within each of these 10 domains. And our data place these motives strategically around this wheel in the sense that motives that are closer together have more in common and they can be easier to meet at the same time. They complement one another a little bit easier. But motives across from one another can hold more friction. So, for example, that friction can happen both internally and externally. You know, I coached someone who had future success as a top motive, along with work-life harmony as a top motive. And those were really for her conflicting, going, God, these needs are holding a lot of friction. What am I going to do about that? On a team in a workshop, we saw that someone was very driven by security and feeling safe and very risk averse. Someone else was driven by the need for innovation. So they really were able to figure out, oh, this is what's making us kind of butt heads right now. So that's kind of the framework at a high level.
It's a really nice illustration. And I love that the proximity allows us to say there are certain activities that we can kind of almost double dip or, you know, get that benefit, because like you said, there's only so many resources to go around. I can't do all of the things, right? So how do I combine neighboring motives and get them met in a creative way? I think it's really powerful. And I love that illustration from the book. And it is very colorful, as you said.
Yeah. No, thank you. Yeah. One of the really important things we say too is it's taking a step back and then looking at what does that framework become for you? Because once you take the assessment, you get your own circumplex and you're able to see where are my motives kind of plotted on the map. Which ones complement each other? Which ones hold friction? And how am I going to be strategic in my decision making to compromise where I need to with myself, with other people? And it's really powerful to do that because sometimes we get tunnel vision on one thing. If I just find that thing I'm passionate about, then my work life's going to be great. And that could be true. Passion could be a top motive for you, but if your other 4 motives aren't met and they're all drowning, it's not going to be enough. So you really have to look at those top needs holistically, whether you're, for yourself or for your team. And that's going to allow you to take a much more empowered approach.
And I think you make the point also that, this is a moment in time and that things do change. I have found personally in reflecting on your work and thinking about how I've approached my life, and at least when I got out of the way and allowed my best self to shine through, then
Yeah.
I've noticed that some of my motives are durable. They've always been there. I suspect they probably always will be there, but others have changed, quite a bit in some cases. Over the course of my life and through my life experiences. So tell me a little bit more about how you approach the topic of change over time when it comes to our motives.
Well, it comes to the heart of this idea that well-being is messy, it's personal, it's multifaceted, it's evolving. We call it the ugly truth because it is. It's not as simple as wrapping it in a little bow and, oh, you just get to this destination and then you're well at work and then your team is well and performs well at work. It's constantly something that's going to evolve. And so your motives don't really change one day to the next, but as your life changes and as you hit significant milestones, both in and outside of work, it of course is going to influence your needs. But as you had mentioned, certain motives can be tied to your values and really your sense of self. So for me, I've been taking the assessment, we say about once a year is a good time to take the assessment, but I've taken it 4 times now. And flexibility and autonomy are still my top 5 motives because they're very tied to my sense of self. They're in the freedom domain. Empowerment's really important to me. And so I had a really good guess when I first took the assessment, those 2 needs were going to rise to the top for me. But I didn't necessarily know what my other 3 would be. And one was just a complete surprise, which was the security motive. Because I'm like an entrepreneur. I'm kind of a risk taker. I'm not very risk averse. So to see this need for security felt really out of character for me. But it was this huge wake up call and aha moment because at that moment, that was my weakest need. I was leaving, the comforts of my career behind to go on this journey of motives met, and that was scary. And that was full of uncertainty and doubt. So I needed to really figure out how I was going to elevate that motive. But I don't have the security motive as the top driver today because it's been years and I've built motives met and I'm in a different place. So like you were saying, certain motives can hold true to who we are and our values over time. And some are going to very much evolve over time.
And now I love the notion of taking it every, however often it makes sense. I also, I'm a huge, beginning of the year, let's kick off and go through the second half of December. I love to start thinking about the year next. Whatever it is about ripping off the calendar is like an invitation to sort of reflect and on the year that's been and what's coming next. And I could see adding this to the battery of things to think about and just check in with yourself and say, has something shifted? Maybe not. I know that a lot of what we led the conversation with, talking about what needs and demands for well-being that workers are bringing in, a lot of that came from post-pandemic, where people started to reconcile what is the role I want work to fit into my life, not push my life to the peripheries of my work. And I can imagine that if you could have had a dashboard of everyone's motives, they would have been like ding, 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 and lighting up and shifting around all over the place. You're like, what is happening? And people really felt like that, like they got unmoored a little bit by saying, I just don't even recognize my day-to-day anymore. Like, how am I going to restructure this?
Yes, no, there was a huge shift. We saw a lot of people really craving a lot more personal connection and belonging or 2 motives and even fun, because for a lot of people, it was the first time they were working from home. So there were big shifts there. So yeah, these big, events can absolutely, affect your motives. You go get a new job, it's going to affect your motives. And I love that idea of the kind of part of your new year check-in piece. And one, to see what has changed and what blind spots, again, me, I built the algorithm for the assessment. And so it's kind of funny that, again, one of them was like, whoa, I was not even aware that that's really a top need for me. But I think something that's so often overlooked too is taking the moment to go, what's going right?
Mm-hmm.
Hey, these are my top 5 needs and they are going so well. And that's amazing. And taking a moment to celebrate that and recognize it is what creates those positive emotions that make us feel good, to be able to take a step back and not always just look what's going wrong and how to improve, which is obviously super important, but also noticing what's going well in our lives. And we also don't do that enough.
Also very true. And I think that earlier you were talking about having a coaching conversation with someone. I've long been an advocate of coaching. I love what a transformative practice it can be. And it makes me think about managers who are in this natural position to act like coaches to their team members. So maybe we can shift our attention a little bit and think about, for the managers themselves, let's start off with, we already talked about a little bit of the complexity or the challenge that they don't have a ton of time, but what other kind of challenges do leaders face when navigating this world of motives?
Well, one that we touched on a little bit as well is that well-being is personal. So you cannot take this one size fits all approach. I had a great conversation with this manager recently who was telling me, I really focus on growth for my team and I want to make sure they're advancing and I'm really great at that. And I was like, that's amazing. That's fantastic, because that's so important. But growth is one of the 28 motives. So what about the other 27? And he was like, whoa, that just kind of blew my mind. There was someone who referred to our framework as like the Everest of leadership, because it kind of is. It's saying like, no, there's not 5 things to worry about. Like there's 28 of them. But to do this successfully, it's really about knowing each of your people well, right? It's leading them, coaching them, inspiring them, supporting them based on their unique needs that drive them. And that's more difficult, but that's, one of the areas our assessment and framework can really help people with. So that's kind of one challenge. Another challenge is the fact that these needs do hold friction with one another, like we just talked about. So it's really, really, really learning to live in the tension of these needs well. If you want that team cohesion, which you talk a lot about in your book, which is great, it's almost just really embracing that this isn't going to be perfectly cohesive, right? It's embracing that friction and going, how do we embrace motive diversity? The fact that we all are going to have different needs, that what I need most is not any more important than what you need most, because we all have biases when it comes to motives. There are certain motives that can be judged, that can be overlooked, and then there are other ones that can be put on a pedestal, or they can just be really prioritized in your culture. So as a leader, it's really important to have your team embrace motive diversity, but then also you really take a step back and go, where do I have biases? Where do I maybe push or judge or dismiss certain motives and not others? Like there's really interesting research that shows that managers actually can look down upon people who don't say that they're calling oriented, that they're not driven by purpose in their organization. So kind of taking that step back and really thinking through that, because that's a big challenge. And a huge concept to drive home that's both a benefit and something that can be a point of contention for leaders is that well-being is co-created at work. So often leaders are told it's on you to create culture. You have to create well-being. You have to care for the mental health of your team. And that's tough. But in some ways, when I talk to leaders, they go, it makes me kind of feel in control, right? Like I have control over this. But reality is you only have so much control and you do have a lot of influence. But if you think about any of these needs being met, any of these motives, the degree that they're going to thrive is going to be based on everybody. It's going to be based on the individual employee, the team members, the leaders, the different kind of procedures and, values of your organization. So, well-being at work happens when leaders and individuals and team members come together to keep these needs healthy for themselves and others. So it's really not about just taking on all of that emotional labor yourself. It's about empowering other people to share in it with you, which is really a great benefit because you're not meant to climb to the top of Everest alone with these 28 needs. You're supposed to have help, but that can be a really great thing, but it can also be a little bit tough to let go of that control. I've seen that with leaders as well. So, but it's a really important concept and a really beneficial thing that happens when you do that, when you start to put more of that ownership and accountability and that idea of co-creation with everybody, is that employees and team members have more compassion for you. And that is a really cool thing to see. Like they go, oh, I get it. There's 28 of these needs. They all conflict. You're managing 20 of us. We all need different things. This isn't going to be perfect. And that creates compassion. That's a two-way street. And that's really important to kind of elevate those work relationships.
I think we've never seen the levels of burnout that we're seeing in our manager ranks today for a lot of reasons that are related to this. The emotional challenges that employees are having as everything around them has changed. They're still reconciling their own roles, the amount of the workload, et cetera. And I think that a manager really sets themselves up to struggle if they say, this is all up to me, or I'm naturally good at these things, or I don't need assessment results like yours, Kelly, to be able to, show me the way. But when we start to enlist our team to help us share the leadership opportunity, I would say, not burden, but an opportunity, amazing things begin to happen. So I could see that if you had a readout, for example, of a team, and we all looked at one another's respective motives, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, I didn't know that you had an interest in creativity. I'm actually working on a project. If you'd like to help, that would be great. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, awesome. That's something I wouldn't have thought of. And now all of a sudden, there's this opportunity that meeting our collective needs is up to the collective. And you can still be the leader and still be in charge and still orchestrate everything and influence everything, for example. But if you try to do it all yourself, not only will you burn yourself out, you won't get to it all. And then you'll be reading about it in the exit interviews that somebody took a different role that gave them the opportunity for creativity they'd always been wanting and had even been talking to you about, but just weren't experiencing at work.
Yeah, I love that phrase you just said of meeting the collective needs is up to the collective. It really, truly, truly is. And the conversations are what really is the gateway to get there. I mean, a lot of what you just alluded to, and again, that's one of the big dream killers is if you get the collective together to talk about this stuff, so much good stuff is going to happen. All these opportunities you didn't know, friction points that you're going to resolve, just connectedness in the sense you're getting to know people as human beings. They feel so much more seen and heard when you as a leader ask about someone's motives and hear their story, what we call their motive story behind it. You hear why something's important to somebody, what's going on in their current life. It opens this door to a conversation that just wouldn't happen otherwise, especially in today's virtual world. I mean, what I have learned about my team members from setting aside an hour to talk about their motives and ask them all these amazing questions related to it is so profound. And it just isn't going to come up in every day-to-day work. So you have to purposely seek out having those conversations.
I love it. I love it. And Kelly, it's just amazing to me when I think about the paradox of leadership, that it's not about you, it's about the mission, it's about those around you. And that means understanding their motives, their true burning needs, and trying to be creative and collaborative and collective about how to get those needs met. That to me is the Mount Everest or the pinnacle of leadership. So I'm going to get you out of here with my easiest question of all. Where can my listeners go to learn more about the book and about you, Kelly?
So our website is motivesmet.com, and you can check out the framework on there, sign up for our newsletter where we have lots of good information. And the book is available anywhere books are sold. You can grab it on Amazon, and you do get a free code to take the human needs assessment with the book purchase, which is pretty cool in my opinion. And then I'm also active on LinkedIn, Kelly Mackin, and Instagram, Kelly Mackin_motivesmet.
I love it. And listeners, I'm going to have those links for you in the show notes. So you're only one click away from learning about Kelly's amazing book and connecting with her and getting all your questions answered. Kelly, thanks so much for spending some time with us today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Such a great conversation.